get rid of the weeds. You got to take the plants from the past year and you got to pull them out. The rocks that sift to the top that are like our emotional blocks, they have to be removed. The soil has to be tenderized and broken down. We have to make room to plant a new garden. So primarily, we learn the most about ourselves and others when we're uncomfortable. Because the moment you move into that uncomfortable state, normally a program jumps in. When that program jumps in, it's because the person doesn't want to be in the present moment and engage it consciously. So when you teach people how to do that with a meditative process, it turns out that when they're in their life, they're less likely to emotionally react. They're less likely to be so rigid and believe the thoughts they were thinking. They're more aware of when they go unconscious back into a habit, and that is what starts the process of change. And so we have to unlearn before we relearn. We have to break the habit of the old self before we reinvent a new self. We have to prune synaptic connections and sprout new connections. We have to unfire and unwire and refire and rewire. We have to unmemorize emotions that are stored in the body, and then recondition the body to a new mind and to a new emotion, like deprogram and reprogram. That's the act, and it's a two-step process.
Yeah, I like the way that you call that out as an action. There was another thing that you said that I thought was really powerful about how insights themselves are essentially inert. They don't do anything. What then do we do with an insight? How do we take a breakthrough moment and make sure that it's not just a breakthrough moment? Like, I guarantee people watching right now are having like 100 aha moments. For sure, that was definitely the case for me as I was researching you. And when you said...
With Monday.com, you can connect your work apps in one place. Start by creating a clear workflow on Monday.com that includes all the vital details. Next, you don't just connect your apps and open the floodgates. You choose exactly how you want it to sync. Let's say a deal is won on your CRM. You'll also see it on Monday.com, and it'll notify the right people so that they can move forward. Now with your apps and people connected, your data is no longer siloed. That means your company has the visibility to work together smoothly, both on the details and the high level. So just start a free trial and connect all your work the easy way.
Make your ISA move today and open a stocks and shares ISA from as little as $4.99 a month with Interactive Investor. Our simple flat fee means you know exactly what you're paying each month and get to keep more of what you make. Plus, you can manage everything on the go using the II app. We're already home to over 400,000 investors who trust us to make their money go further. And you can choose from over 40,000 UK and international investments and access guides and ideas from our experts. So click on the link below and say hello to better investing with Interactive Investor.
And you said that, and that's the danger, that you aha and then nothing.
Yeah, and it is a danger, because then people will shrink back into mediocrity, and they'll use the insight to excuse them from taking a leap. They'll say, yeah, I have a chemical imbalance in my brain. Yeah, my father was really overbearing. He was a perfectionist. That's why I am the way I am. People, they come up with stuff to excuse themselves. The insight is actually giving them permission to stay limited. And it's an amazing idea, because they'll say to you that they really want to get over their anxiety. But let's take your ex-husband, let's put him in a straitjacket, let's duct tape him and shoot him to the moon. Now what? What are you going to do now? You still have to make those changes. And so then when the person's enemy dies, or something shifts in their life, and that person's gone, they'll find another person to hate. This is just how we function as human beings. We just slide another reason to feel those emotions. So I think when people start to understand this, I think knowledge is power, but knowledge about yourself is self-empowerment.
So how much of this is really learning to just bifurcate the world into there's negative emotions that have negative neurochemistry associated with, and you said that in those states, if you're living in a perpetual state of stress hormones and things like that, illness is like a step away. And then just the other side of that is understanding, but there's this whole other side of positive energy, which happiness, joy, empowerment, whatever that neurochemical cocktail is, but that when you're on that side, your immune system is more likely to function well. Like, is that just sort of bringing it down to like a really base level? Is that sort of one of the big pieces?
Well, let's talk about it in terms of survival or creation. As I said, 70% of the time, people live in stress, and living in stress is living in survival. Now, all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. A deer gets chased by a pack of coyotes. When it outruns the coyotes, it goes back to grazing and the event is over. And the definition of stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance, out of homeostasis. The stress response is what the body innately does to return itself back to order. So you're driving down the road, someone cuts you off, you jam on the brakes, you may give them the finger, and then you settle back down and the event is over and boom, now everything's back to normal. But what if it's not a predator that's waiting for you outside the cave, but what if it's your coworker sitting right next to you, and all day long you're turning on those chemicals because they're pushing all your emotional buttons. When you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off, now you're headed for disease, because no organism in nature can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time. It's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress downregulate genes and create disease, long-term effects. Human beings, because of the size of the neocortex, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. We can think about our problems and turn on those chemicals. That means then our thoughts could make us sick. So if it's possible that our thoughts could make us sick, is it possible then our thoughts could make us well? The answer is absolutely yes. So then, what are the emotions that are connected to survival? Let's name them. Anger, aggression, hostility, hatred, competition, fear, anxiety, worry, pain, suffering, guilt, shame, unworthiness, envy, jealousy. Those are all created by the hormones of stress. And psychology calls them normal human states of consciousness. I call those altered states of consciousness. So then we tend to remember those traumatic events more because in survival, you better be ready if it happens again. And when the survival gene is switched on, you could have 10 really great things that happen to you in your day. And you just have one bad thing that happens, and you cannot take your attention off that unhappy thing because the survival gene is switched on.
It's really interesting. How does epigenetics come into play in all this? Like, what's actually happening? You've talked pretty profoundly about proteins and, like, really at a deep level, how we're signaling to our genetics to create these kinds of changes. What does that actually look like?
Well, epigenetics, epi means above the gene. And many years ago, after the DNA helix was discovered by Watson and Crick, they said the blueprints of life, all diseases are created from genes. It turns out less than 5%, more like 1% of people on the planet are born with a genetic condition like type 1 diabetes or Tay-Sachs disease or sickle cell anemia. The other 95 to 99% are created by lifestyle and by choices. You can take two identical twins, exact same genome. One dies at 51, the other one dies at 85. Same gene, different environment. So all of a sudden they said, we lied. That was wrong. It's not genes that create disease. It's the environment that signals the gene that creates disease. Well, okay. But that's not the whole truth too, because you could have two people working side by side in the same factory. One gets cancer after being exposed to a carcinogenic for 25 years. Both working for 25 years, the other one has no cancer at all. So there must be some internal order that would cause one person to not get it while another one does. So is it possible then, if the environment signals the gene, and it does, and the end product of an experience in the environment is called an emotion, Can you signal the gene ahead of the environment by embracing an elevated emotion? We've done the research on this. We measured 7,500 different gene expressions in a group of people that came to an advanced event for 4 days. And we had them doing a seated meditation, a walking meditation, a laying down meditation, a standing meditation. And at the end of 4 days, just 4 days, the common 8 genes that were upregulated, 2 genes to suppress cancer cells and tumor growth, 2 genes for neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons in response to novel experiences and learning, the gene that signals stem cells to go to damaged areas and repair them, the gene for oxidative stress was upregulated. We started seeing all these genes that are very, very healthy to cause the body to flourish. Imagine if people were doing that for 3 months. We also measured telomeres, the little shoestrings on the end of DNA that tell us our biological age. We asked people to do the work, meditation, 5 out of 7 days for 60 days. Measure their telomeres to determine their biological age. 60 days later, 74% of the people lengthened their telomeres. 40% significant change. 20% a very remarkable change. That means that they got a little bit of their life back. If it had lengthened by 10%, they got 10% of their life back.
That's incredible. Before I ask my last question, tell these guys where they can find you online.
Sure, my website is just drjoedispenza.com. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're all over.
And then my final question, what's the impact that you want to have on the world?
I think that the end game for me is to empower people to such a degree that they realize that they need less things outside of them to make them happy, less things outside of them to regulate their moods and their behaviors, and that they begin to use that kind of the power that we all have access to, and to really to change the world, to make a difference so that there's more peace, there's more wholeness, there's more connection, that we support and love each other, we serve better. And I think that we have to start, for the most part, if everybody's working on themselves and doing their best to present the greatest ideal of themselves to the world, I think the world will be a better place. And so that's my passion, and I'm witnessing it happening now more than I ever thought I would.
That's incredible. Joe, thank you so much for being here. It was amazing having you. Guys, go watch this man's videos. They are some of the best explanations of what's going on inside the mind that I've ever come across. There were several that I literally have people in my life that I'm going to force to sit down and watch these things. They're just incredible explanations of how you create yourself out of the things that you do habitually. The way that you think creates a feeling. The way that you feel creates thinking that matches that. And then you get in this cycle. And that coming down to that personality ultimately being a finite set of patterns in your brain, I think is really, really illuminating in terms of how we actually experience the world. And I think when people understand that it's within your control, that you don't have to believe every thought that you think, that you can step outside of that you can leverage metacognition to think about your thinking and deconstruct it and decide what you want to think about and start focusing on that and create an entirely different version of yourself that has new, elevated feelings, that's over on the side of the positivity, empowering yourself. I think it's really incredible, and he gets deep into the mechanistic stuff, which I love. You guys will not regret diving deep into this man's world. I think you will get some incredible revelations. All right, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Thank you so much for being here. That was incredible.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching and being a part of this community. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. You're going to get weekly videos on building a growth mindset, cultivating grit, and unlocking your full potential.
Hurry, Mix. Yes. Maybe the bear could steal the ring, which is the crown jewel, and run away with it. Maybe the police could find him. Yeah. We are the police.
If something isn't working for you anymore, maybe it's time to switch with the current account switch service.
coworkers, and you started thinking about and rehearsing how you were going to act in certain situations. The brain actually doesn't know the difference between the real-life experience and what you're imagining. The research on mental rehearsal shows that the brain will look like in time that it's already had the experience and it's vacant of the experience. Now, keep firing and wiring those circuits and you're going to begin to behave that way. So now, you're installing circuitry now to use in your life to get your behaviors to match your intentions. If you said, how would it feel to feel worthy of love? How would it feel to be grateful for life? How would it feel to be worthy of abundance? And you said, I'm going to teach my body emotionally what this feels like before the manifestation of the event. You're not waiting for your life to change to feel worthy. You're actually changing your life by becoming worthy. You're generating abundance. You're generating love. You're creating an elevated emotion. Now, our data is so compelling because when you truly begin to elevate your emotional state, and you could really lock in, to those elevated emotions, your body is so objective that it actually believes that it's living in a whole new environment before the environment changes. In other words, the body's believing it's in that new future. And if the environment signals the gene, and it does, and the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion, you're actually signaling genes ahead of the environment, and your body will begin to become conditioned to a new mind. Now think about this. If you did that every day, the word meditation literally means become familiar with. You become familiar with your old self, you become familiar with your new self, and you say, I'm not getting up until I feel this feeling. And then you'd say, I want to be able to bring this feeling up whenever I want. I'm going to keep remembering this feeling over and over again. It only takes a thought and a feeling, an image of the future and emotion, a stimulus and response, that you can condition your body to believe it's living in a whole new life. And when you feel the emotions of your future, something amazing happens. You're no longer in lack or separation, so you're no longer looking for the event to take away that feeling of lack or separation. Your body's actually believing it's in the event. And so then you're not looking for it, you feel like it's already happened. Get ready, because that's when your life begins to change. And so we've discovered that if you're actually practicing this and you immersed yourself in that experience fully for 7 days, the amount of metabolic and biological changes that will take place in your body will be so significant that your body will actually believe it's living in that future. And yet, most of the people that come to our workshops are literally in a ballroom. There's nothing really exciting happening in the environment, but their body's believing they're living in a whole new life. And so, one thought leads to a choice, which leads to behavior, which creates an experience that produces an emotion. So then, new information, new knowledge begins to cause you to think differently. If you can remember that knowledge and begin to make a different choice because you want to experience the truth of that information, you'll have to behave differently. And when the experience occurs and you feel the feeling of your abundance or wealth, I guarantee you're going to continue wanting to make the process of change something consistent in your life.
This is why I love talking to you. I mean, that literally, what you just said there, I hope everyone listens to it again and again and again. And partly, I think there's something to be said for that. The best things that have rewired my brain and my mind were things that I repeated daily. I took something that I loved listening to or loved learning or reading a paragraph of a book, and I would literally just